just to let everybody know, before we start this podcast does not make any monetization whatsoever, and even if it would have done, no money would be made from producing this podcast. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because at the time of recording, unfortunately, we have to send our condolences to Hana Kimura that passed away at the age of 22, and also recently, at time of recording, Shad Gaspard also passed away as well. Both tragic and both sad, and we send all our love to the family and friends and everyone affected. And so, yeah, on to the show. Hello, guys, and welcome to another episode of DrayZera Uncensored. My name is DrayZera, and we have got a very special guest that'll be here throughout the show today. So, we have got a poet, storyteller, speaker, just does so many things, co-founder of Fight Evil with Poetry Press, and just loves speaking about culture, creativity, and the joy of failure. All that right now with the one and only Chris Cambell. Hello, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Really excited to be here.
Oh, well, we're very excited to have you here as well. So yeah, so let's get straight into it. So I've been reading up about you before this podcast began, and it seems that you've got quite a story to tell. I've got this book in front of me via BarnesandNoble.com, Fight Evil with Poetry. Whoa! Edited by yourself and Mika Barnes, and so many stuff to tell us. But let's just go right to the beginning. So tell us about yourself from the beginning, kind of thing, and tell us how you fell in love with the arts of poetry and the like.
Absolutely. So, I suppose to start off, my family life growing up was really crazy. It was, a lot of people have traumatic childhoods, and that's not necessarily uncommon, but mine was especially chaotic and disorganized. So my dad was actually a drug dealer. He was murdered when I was a baby.
Oh, wow.
And because of that, sort of, my mom, she was only 15 when she got pregnant with me. It was one of those things where after that, she ended up marrying the drug dealer who killed him because she had no other choice. Then within like another year or two, that guy got killed.
Wow.
And from there, we just moved around a lot, and my mom did, pretty much anything you can do for money. So growing up was like just constant moving, constant, in a sense, uncertainty. And that was something that, wasn't my favorite, but I found a real refuge once I got to school age, in academics. Anything to do with school, I was just naturally very good at. I was, very lucky in that regard. I never had to study, never had to do any of that stuff. I've always been very curious. I've been a big reader since, I could read at like 4. So that was really how I fell in love with writing and poetry and storytelling, is because, in a sense, I didn't think of it this way at the time. I never read for escapism. But I imagine, a lot of it was based off of the situation around me, is not that great. And I just wanted, to see that there was more out there. So I would read a lot of books. I would read a lot of poetry. And then at school, writing exercises, stuff like that, you start doing poetry, you start doing stories, you start doing all that. And the teachers would be like, oh, wow, Chris, you're really good at this. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, if I'm good at this, like, maybe I should do some more. And then over the years, it became a little bit of like a party trick. So if, when I was like 11, 12, if I liked a girl, it's like, all right, well, I will write her a poem, and then she'll be very impressed, and like, well, won't that be like a nice thing? But I didn't really start taking it seriously, I suppose, until high school. And a lot of the poetry that I would have written during that time is, thankfully, it's not in existence anymore.
Oh, is it one of those? So is it one of those where it was kind of so so assuming that we're not too far similar in age, we're quite similar in age, I'd assume. So
Yeah.
when I was a teenager, I wrote song lyrics, and they were quite dark as hell, and some of it was borderline cringy, and I was like, oh, thank lasagna. I don't perform these. You know what I mean?
Exactly, yeah.
And
I mean,
mm,
it's crazy though thinking about it because, if I was growing up, like, if I was a teenager right now, I guarantee, not only would there be a record of those poems, but there would be, like, video evidence on YouTube for, like, the entire world to see
for
my
the
whole life.
for the
And
rest of time,
so
yeah.
I actually think that's going to be really fascinating, in another 20 years when we see the next generation of serious writers, start to, take their place on the stage, to then be able to look back and be like, oh yeah, when they were 7, they were like doing this on YouTube? Like, that's crazy. And
Mm.
I don't know, hopefully it helps people, track the writing process a lot more. I don't know about you, but I've read like probably 4 or 5 dozen books on writing, and there's always this element of like, I'm not sure how you do the thing you do fully.
Mm.
And I feel like the more data we can get around, how people do, the great skills that they have, honed over time, the more likely it is that we can sort of emulate those results.
That's a very fair point, actually. And just to clarify, so you talk about traveling earlier. Assuming so, for all those viewers at home, were
Oh
you
yeah.
growing up? Were you growing up in America? We're assuming.
Yeah, that's a good point. I always just assume from my voice that people know it's painfully obvious I'm from America. Yeah,
Mhm.
so I'm from America. We moved around, like I said, quite a lot.
State to state
Sometimes,
or province to province, or?
yeah, quite often state to state, because it would sort of the way I tend to describe it is my parents were hippies and criminals, so we were either moving for good vibes or bad vibes.
Oh
Um,
wow.
but basically, by the time I was 21, I'd lived in 38 states. Um,
38 states. That's two.
yeah.
Isn't that like that's three-quarters of America, isn't it?
Yeah. So I mean, it's an awful lot of America to have lived in.
Mm.
And some of it was like, oh, we lived there for a couple of months, and then you move on.
Mm.
But it was still, a little bit crazy. Um, And
Wow.
then, sort of university, I went to university in Chicago. In America, we go for 4 years, sort of no matter what, unless you, do a longer program for like a master's or whatever.
Right.
And that was the first time I actually had like stability, consistency, that sort of thing, because finally my, geographic location wasn't really based on anybody else's, whims or troubles.
Yeah, you're
And
your
that's
own boss finally.
yeah, and that's the city that I really fell in love with. Like, even though I've lived in the UK for 9 years now, and I haven't been back to the States in all that time, I would still consider Chicago like my hometown.
What
Um,
makes Chicago very special for you? Because all I know about Chicago is the Allstate Arena, the CM Punk, the wrestler, the also what was I going to say? Yeah, Chicago. So CM Punk, the Allstate Arena, wrestling's quite strong in that place, and the fact that there's Chicago Town Pizza. That's all I know.
yeah. So the way I like to describe it is, there are certain cities in America that are held up as like, ooh, wow. So we're thinking like L.A., New York. To be honest, that's probably it. People think of those as, ooh, wow, that'd be really cool. And, I've been to L.A. loads of times, been to New York loads of times, and nothing against them, but I feel like Chicago is sort of like the last great American city, in that, if you go to LA, even though obviously it has its very own strong culture, it just feels in many ways like a very big city always does. Like, nobody has time, everybody's busy, get out of my way, don't talk to me, just come on, like, I've got things to do. And New York, very similar. Like, New York is so much like London in
Yeah.
that, people just, they do not want interaction. Whereas in Chicago, it feels like it's a working man's city. It's very like blue collar in that regard. So the way I like to describe it is, in New York, if you stopped and asked for directions, people wouldn't give you the time of day. But in Chicago, if you did the same thing, they wouldn't only stop and listen and then reply, but they would reply with something along the lines of like, oh, what? You're going there? No, you don't want to go there. What you want to do is you want to go to this place over here. Nobody's ever heard of it, but it's way better and way cheaper, and it's really going to set you up right. Tell them, that Sal sent you, and yeah, they'll treat you right.
So essentially, they really they go the extra mile to help you, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it just feels like, obviously it's still a big city. It's, over 10 million people. But, people aren't going to think you're crazy for asking them a question on the street. And they're going to reply with just that little bit more, I suppose, warmth and generosity.
Yeah, with a bit more empathy and humility kind of thing, yeah?
Together.
Yeah, that's absolutely fun. That's awesome. I mean, for me, so I've only been to San Francisco.
Cool, yeah.
So I've only been there, and my San Francisco experience, even though it is a bit busy, there's kind of like a very kind of chill vibe compared to the very small time that I've been in LA. I only went to LA for LAX. I haven't been to actual LA, if that makes sense. But the vibe that I felt with San Francisco is kind of chill. But yeah, definitely it seems like Chicago. Chicago, if my brain is correct, that's in the Midwest of America, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Midwest, and so had his own kind of thing, own kind of vibe in that regard. But yeah, like definitely it seems like definitely a place to check out, Chicago. So we talked about you studying in Chicago. So where did the bridge between yourself in America and coming to the UK? So how did that all come about?
Yeah, so that's the other reason why Chicago is really special to me. Is because not only is it sort of the first place I've ever lived that I felt like, yeah, like I'm home, but also it's the city where I really fell in love with pursuing poetry, performing poetry, but also it's the city I fell in love with my wife. So nice. She was an English exchange student, and we met in our last semester at university, and immediately I just fell head over heels. And ironically, it was one of those things where, literally the day before I announced to all of my friends, you know what, I'm done with dating in university. I just want to be finished with this and, continue on with what I have in mind for the future.
Yeah.
And then literally the next day I meet this girl and I'm just like, oh, this girl is really interesting. And we stayed up until 3 a.m. talking, and I was just like, I don't like her, but I could see myself liking her. And all my friends were like, yeah, you don't like her? And then 3 days later, I was just like, all right, guys, you were right. I've been hanging out with this girl hours and hours every day, every chance I can get. Yeah, I really like this girl. And it took, it took a fair bit of pursuing, I suppose. She definitely put me through my paces. One of the things that is kind of a funny story is, after knowing her for only 4 or 5 weeks, I was just like, listen, we only have 2.5 months left before we're going to be in totally different countries. It's kind of a now or never thing. So let me take you out on a date, and I promise you're going to have an amazing time. And she was just like, yeah, no. And I was like, oh, what? Why? And she sort of gave her reasons, but one of the big ones was, well, I'm, English, I'm from the north of England, and the fact is, I want to live there. And there's no way I'm just going to date some American guy and, get stuck in America. So if we were to date and, things were to be serious at all, then we'd have to be willing to move to the UK. And for me, because I moved around so much growing up, I was just like, all right, yeah, I would do that.
Wow.
But she didn't really know my background that much at this point. And she didn't tell me this until after we were married. But she was like, oh, yeah, I just totally thought you were lying, saying what I wanted to hear. And I'm like, what? That would be the world's dumbest lie. Because it's clearly leading to a point where it's like, oh, yeah, you remember when I said I would move across the ocean for you to the new and strange worlds? Well, no. It's like, what? Like, you're obviously going to get caught out on something like that. But in the end, obviously, I wasn't lying. I told the truth.
I mean,
and on,
yeah, you're right here, right now, aren't you?
On May 25th, 2011, I moved over here to the UK, and I have not been back to the States since.
Yeah, indeed, yeah. So tell me then, so do you feel that you would have, because of this marriage and this love you've created in Chicago, but now is in England? How has that changed you or like affected you? Because it seems that looking at your work, you seem to have gone strength to strength in these past 9 years living in the UK. I mean, do you feel that the UK feels better overall than America? Because mind you, I'm just thinking to myself, in America you've had so much instability, whereas in UK it seems that you've been more relaxed and settled.
That's an interesting one. And I think a lot of it gets down to what the immigrant experience is like. And I don't think I could have ever guessed what that experience would have been like until I lived it. And granted, let me just start by saying, like, I come from a native speaking English country. I have a university degree. I came over here with no debt. I'm married. Another my wife has a master's. She was a teacher. Again, she had no debt. Like, we were in the best possible situation in terms of how easy it is to immigrate. But it's actually been a really difficult process. Just practically, it's been over £6,000 in visa fees. I'm now in a
Really?
state where I can get citizenship anytime I want, but it costs like $2,000, which is just expensive. But on top of that, every application was, £2 or £3 worth of paperwork. And then there's also just like the experience of living as an immigrant. And the way that I describe it is, and this sounds like maybe melodramatic, and that might be the poet in me, but honestly, this is just how it feels. Like, you're automatically wrong. Like, that's the default position. And that impacts you in ways that go, like, large to, infinitesimal. Such that, like, when I see something crazy happen on the street, or if, like, someone tries to pick a fight with me, my instinct is, well, you can't do that, and I get, like, a little bit indignant. And then I'm like, wait, can they do that in this country? I don't actually know. I should know, because, like, that should be common sense. Like, but I don't know. And so that constant being wrong, that constant being unsure, and a lot of the racism that I've encountered as a result of that as well it's been very humbling. I would say it's softened a lot of my hard edges, and I would say it's forced me to be a lot more disciplined. I think it has been really good, but it has also been really hard. It's definitely, grown a lot within me that I do really value. And to be honest, one of the main reasons why I'm really nervous about moving back to America someday is not so much the reverse culture shock or anything like that, but just the fact that, like, when I move back to America, I won't be an immigrant anymore. And, like, it sounds really, trite or trivial because it's like, oh, it's just a label. But it's become such a distinct part of my identity that, to willingly sort of lose that or remove that feels like it's gonna, like, how can anyone possibly understand me if they don't understand that I've been an immigrant? That's how formative I would say it's been.
That's very interesting because like that's a very fair point because so obviously I'm a non-white guy myself, right? So I've experienced racism in a main vanilla country such as the UK, and there's a load of bigotry and negativity and that kind of stuff, unfortunately, for people who are of color. And yeah, it is like a weird dichotomy because, like, I mean, I guess, for example, for my parents, even like, because my parents came from Bangladesh to come to this country, right, before I was born. So I feel for their case, I feel that they kind of feel a spectrum of similarity to what you're saying, even though they've lived here for years and years. There is always a kind of vibe or feeling, such as, say, maybe it's a bit hard to say, but maybe a bit of an outsider to the main core of society, if that makes sense?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So, yeah, like, yeah, so, it's just like, it is one of those things, and, yeah, oh, man, it is pretty, it is obviously, it's not always the easiest topic to touch about, but yeah, so, but I'll tell you this, so moving on from, like, the side of, say, hardship and that, and the kind of, like, the story behind your works. I mean, I'm looking at your website, it looks very professional, looks good, and that kind of stuff. So, were you published in America beforehand, or did your spoken word career and your art and all that kind of stuff, the Chris Cambell experience, did that really come when you got to the UK?
So no, I was definitely published in a number of like zines and smaller lit mags and stuff in Chicago, and that's where I started doing spoken word, performance. But when I first moved over here 9 years ago, we were living in Leeds, and at the time, I looked all over for poetry, even just like a writing group generally. And there was like one, but it met in like a weird place at a weird time that didn't work for me, and it wasn't poetry, it was just sort of generic writing. And later I found out it was like all really old people, and not to sound ageist, like I've met some amazing people who are older than me, and they often have, so much that you can learn from.
Yeah.
But like it wasn't like
It
a
wasn't.
group of peers.
It wasn't your vibe. You could.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
And because of that, it actually was really hard because there's nowhere to share my work. And so I was still writing, but I just had no outlet for it. And so
Yeah.
it just like went into folders on my computer. And the other thing was, one sort of running theme in my work, in any of the writing that I do, is like, I try to be as open and vulnerable and honest as possible. About the good and the bad, because I think, there are times when, we learn a lot more from our failures and our flaws than we do from our victories.
Yeah.
And it was strange, suddenly being newly married, because I had no familial attachment really before that. Like, I have, some half brothers and sisters, and I love them dearly, but like, just because of a lot of crazy stuff that happened, like there was no contact there, not consistently. And even when there was contact, it wasn't like, we're all in this together. It was sort of like a bunch of, islands, and we would sort of, shout messages, over the ocean at each other. And suddenly, I have this person who is like a life partner and is wrapped up in pretty much everything that I do, and is much less comfortable with being spoken about or written about than I am. And so then I had to sort of work through like, okay, well, like, what stories are mine to tell, and what stories should I avoid telling out of respect for, my wife? So there were definitely a couple of years in there where things just got like kind of weird with my writing. I also started thinking through, at the time, a lot of my work was, still touching on a lot of the issues that I touch on now, like social justice and being an outsider, and, just looking at the hard things in life from sort of an alternate perspective. But it was very much like, I don't know, like maybe more complaining. Like, I wasn't necessarily looking to offer solutions. I was more just looking to point out stuff and go, oh, I don't like that. That's not good.
Things suck.
Yeah, exactly. And like, that's important to do, but I started realizing, if my children are going to read my work someday, if my work is something that's going to outlast me, which, like, who knows whether or not it will, but if that's to be the case, like, what do I want to leave behind? And that's when I was just like, oh, it makes a lot more sense to maybe talk about these same issues and maybe complain about these same issues, but do it within the context of maybe my own experiences or the experiences of people who are very near and dear to me, so that I can sort of tell a story and present a situation that is unjust, and through the way that I talk about experiencing it, make it clear that I think this situation is unjust, but trust the reader enough to be able to, dig into it and figure out some of the nuance themselves. Because, like, for instance, when I tell people, like, the story of my life or whatever, which I only did, like, the super abbreviated Cliff Notes version here, people often end up looking at my mom and going, like, oh, man, she was terrible. It's just a shame you went through that. That's awful. But, like, over the years, what I've realized is my mom was the victim of abuse and all sorts of stuff because, like, she had me when she was 15, but the only reason she married my dad is because, like, my grandma forced her to. And I know this is, like, getting super heavy, but, like, essentially, I realized, 4 or 5 years ago, I was like, oh, that was basically, like, sex slavery. Like, that was all it was. And, like, it's just insane. And so, as I've gotten older, as I've, gotten a little bit more perspective on the things that have happened to me, I realized a lot of the people in my life that others or myself might classify as, the villains in the story, often they're just people who've been really hurt. And they're people who, they're making lots of mistakes, but very rarely is it them setting out to do the things that they're doing. It's more them trying to do the best that they can and just failing spectacularly. And when I look at it that way, it's a lot easier to find compassion on those people, and it's a lot easier for me to eventually sort of learn some lessons from them and try to, take what I can from that and apply that, in my own life, because we're all going to encounter people who, they feel like antagonists, they feel like villains, they feel like, just bad people. And, sometimes I have met people where I'm like, I can find nothing redemptive, in you or what you're doing. I don't know how you got here, but, like, man, you're in a bad place. But for the most part, it doesn't tend to be fully like that. It tends to be misunderstandings, miscommunications, those sorts of things that lead to a lot of conflict. So yeah, I suppose, I don't know if that answers the question, but that's where I stand.
I mean, no, that's some pretty deep stuff. Like, I'm being honest, that was amazing. So much so that we have gone so deep into the world of Chris Cambell that we got to move to the next section of this podcast, of which you're actually going to be one of the first guests in a very long time that is going to not only have your own section, but you're going to have the rest of the discussion. The rest of the discussion, which the second part is talking about Japanese wrestling. Are you ready, Chris?
Oh, I'm so ready. I'm an empty vessel, ready to be filled.
Alright. Awesome stuff. Okay, Moonlight Army, we are gonna head over and talk to Jackie Hyde and Dan Pettit in a bit. Welcome back to DrayZera Uncensored, and we have got a jam-packed all-star cast. We have got a returning guest in Dan Pettit. Hello, Dan.
Hello, Dre. How are you?
I'm good, man. We have got Chris Cambell back on stage.
Hey.
Hey, Chris. And we have got professional wrestler, the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th wonder of the world, the always positive Jackie Hyde.
I just stepped in dog shit.
That's probably the shit that I just said in saying that you're always positive, but anyway.
This podcast got off to a great start, didn't it?
Right, so everybody will be talking about Japanese wrestling in general, and Chris is a massive lover of just Japanese culture in general, but he really wants to learn more about Japanese wrestling, hence why we brought him in for this section. And also, Yeah, so Chris, tell me about your interest in Japan before we carry on.
Yeah, so it's just one of those things where, man, I must have been like 7 or 8, and we just had to learn about different countries and stuff in school, and the two that really stood out to me was Egypt and Japan. They just had really interesting histories, a lot of, just the ancient stories coming out of both of those countries really fascinated me, which was totally different than most countries, because I thought history was pretty boring. Like, if you give me a story of one person's life, I find that interesting, but, usually sort of overarching, oh, well, this was like a city in this the country, and then now like this happened. It's just sort of like, who cares? It's kind of boring. Whereas, yeah, just the history in Japan really captured me, and then of course I got into like a lot of anime and manga, and J-pop and all that sort of stuff. But then, there's so much outside of, the typical anime that you see that it's just really fascinating about Japan culturally. And so I read a bunch of, books that were nonfiction, just about Japanese culture, and then, quite a few historical fiction books and stuff like that. And so it's just this idea that, like, I suppose to me, Japan is and has been my entire life a very hyper modern society, and yet they're also one of the countries that hold on to their historical culture more like fervently than really anybody else that I know of. And I just find that juxtaposition really fascinating, because for me, I don't know, like, not to get too esoteric, but like, my history in terms of family is kind of like whatever.
Yeah.
Like, that's never mattered to me. It's always been about like the here, the now, and the future. And just seeing like the most future forward society in the world also feeling so important about the past has really challenged me over the years. And I just love their style of storytelling, and their dedication to like mastery in like anything they do, whether it's cooking sushi rice or chicken livers or animation. It's just it's remarkable. And so Japanese wrestling, I've always known has been this huge thing, but I've never known anybody who is really like into it. And so it's just this real big empty space in Japanese pop culture for me.
That's a well detailed answer, to the point that I'm like, wow, we might need to bring you back on to talk about J-pop and anime and manga, because I can talk about that for days as well. Sorry, Dan, you carry on.
Have you worked for the Japanese tourist board long?
Touche. You've found me out.
By the way, guys, if you're hearing some sort of like background kind of noise, it's just because Dan needed to wake himself up due to not sleeping much, so he needed a bit of fresh air. So he's live. Well, he's not live. This is pre-recorded, but he is live to us via the outside world.
He's on the road.
On the road. Yeah. So interestingly, Japan in terms of wrestling is pretty mad. I mean, Jack, have you wrestled against or have wrestled in the same show of any Japanese wrestlers before?
Yeah, a few people. What's his name? Tengu.
Cool.
Remember Tengu? Yeah.
I think I have a loose memory of Tengu. Yeah, carry on, Jack.
Yeah, he's cool.
And anyone else that you've wrestled with as well? Because I know that because you wrestled with so many people, like, oh yeah, I wrestled with that guy, yeah. Jack?
No, but was what's his wrestling name? Sid Parker. He had a match with Tajiri not long ago.
Tajiri. I don't know if Chris can remember Tajiri, because Chris, I think you loosely remember. You told me before that you did watch WWF back during the Attitude Era. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So do you loosely remember Kai and Tai, aka Tajiri and
Yeah.
Whoa. Tajiri wasn't in Kai and Tai.
Was he not?
No, that's Taka and Funaki.
Oh yeah, my bad. My apologies. Sorry. Sorry. Just but Tajiri was around just about during the Attitude Era. That's where I got confused. Yeah. So
He used to spit the green mist.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember him now, Dre?
Yeah, I do remember the green mist. Yeah. A gimmick that's totally not been repeated before. No, not at all. No. Not at all.
I'll be honest, it's one of the most racist stereotype gimmicks going. I mean, they even gave it to Albert when he was portraying a Japanese man.
Oh yeah, Tensai. Yeah, absolutely. Do you Chris, do you remember Albert or A Train when he used to like tag team with Test years ago?
None at the moment. No, it doesn't ring a bell. But it has been a long time.
Yeah. I'll tell you. It's just been. It's like wrestling has like changed so much since we were kids. But WWE is still. They're pretty racist still. But that's another topic altogether. So that's any involvement with WWE has just ended right there. So anyway.
It ended the moment you called them WWF, I'll be honest. We're going to get sued to buggery.
Alright then. So Japanese wrestling these days is obviously the biggest promotion in Japan is New Japan. That's the big daddy right there. And in terms of female only promotion, Stardom is the biggest female only promotion. So yeah, Japan has a very strong history, Chris, of female wrestlers.
Oh, that's awesome.
Very strong history, as in arguably some of the greatest female wrestlers in history has come all from Japan. Would that be a fair assessment, Dan and Jack?
I would say the top 3 wrestlers of all time are Japanese.
And
female wrestlers, I should say.
Alright, yeah. Jack, do you agree? Okay. Alright.
I'm not sure what that was. It sounded like a toilet flush.
Well, guys, comment below if you think that Jack flushed the toilet.
Are you sure that was dog shit, Jack?
Anywho, so Dan, tell us your top 3 best female Japanese wrestlers.
Oh, number 1, Minami Toyota. She was amazing. She was so good in the ring. Number 2, Miko Satomura, who's still active. I had the honour of meeting her a few years ago, and she grabbed my bum, which is a professional wrestling highlight for me.
Whoa! What the hell? When did this happen? What?
I went to a Pro Wrestling Eve show, and she had this absolutely blinding 5-star match with a just Scottish wrestler called Sami Zayn.
Oh yeah, I know Sami Zayn. Yeah.
And afterwards, she obviously met fans. I was one of the first in the line, and she said, that, did you enjoy my match? I said, yeah. She said in her culture, she liked big men. And she put her hand on my bum when we were taking the photo, which I wasn't complaining.
Well.
My ass if I had.
So if you're listening to this, comment below if you still remember Dan. Wow.
You want my number, I'll hook you up.
Alright, oh my days. And who's your number 1?
The third one, I would say, would be Bull Nakano.
Oh, Bull Nakano is an absolute legend, yes.
She was one of the first real powerhouse different wrestlers. And she was one of the first wrestlers to really have good runs in WWE and WCW back in the day.
If you don't mind me asking, sort of like, what's your criteria when you start ranking these wrestlers? What are you looking at?
Me, I'm looking at what they did for the sport, and personally, I look for enjoyment. That was a horse fan just went past. I'm looking for enjoyment of their matches. Like you sit there and you live a wrestling match. Some matches you will sit there and they will just drag on, and you can see the finish coming a mile away. And then there are other matches that just capture it, and you've got your heart in your mouth, and you're like, oh my god! But you can't take your eyes off it.
Yeah.
Minami Toyota had so many of those matches that it was just incredible.
And
she was just
And going on Dan's point, is a fair argument that 90s women's Japanese wrestling, that was a complete world away from 90s women's Western wrestling. They were literally.
Oh, it's come on so much.
It's come on so much, and I mean, I think this even it's very hard to say that even today's standard, even though the women's wrestlers of today they're at an exceptional standard, I feel that the '90s wrestlers not only paved the way, but I feel that it's just a complete different. I think that it's still it's kind of untouched. If that makes sense, like the levels are still great. If that makes sense, it's like absolutely incredible in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, yeah, and the good thing about Japanese wrestling is that there's not really the level of politics. I would say there's always politics in any kind of world, but I would say that arguably in Japan there's far less bureaucracy and say politics than let's say in westernized wrestling, if that made sense, or specifically WWE. But you know.
Yeah. Although it's very interesting because when I've heard interviews from people who used to be big into the wrestling scene in America, people always ask them like how much of like the politics and stuff is manufactured and how much is real, and I always expect them to say all of that stuff is completely part of the show, but it's really remarkable how many of them say no, like these are people's lives, and a lot of them really do get very wrapped up in it in a way that feels scripted, but is 100% just their natural reaction.
Absolutely. And the one thing that I will say that is awesome also about Japanese wrestling is that the talent is so good that they get highlighted by bigger companies in the Americas, like for example, and also like in the indie scene in other countries like Minami Toyota, and Satomura. They've wrestled in Europe before and that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's like wow. Yeah, so there's also companies such as Pro Wrestling Noah, and there's other companies within. Dan, you're getting a little bit backgroundy, staticky kind of thing, like a load of wind happening your end.
Sorry. I'll turn around.
Sorry. But yeah, we've got Pro Wrestling Noah. We've got so many like promotions that like
You have to mention Dragon Gate.
Absolutely, Dragon Gate. Yeah, so there's a Dragon Gate was where the wrestler known as Pac really came into prominence as well. Yeah, absolutely, and yeah, it's just so pretty. It's so amazing. Like, yeah. Sorry, I'm just like romanticizing over Japanese wrestling because one of them like I think I'm the biggest fan of out of all the promotions of Japanese wrestling is New Japan Pro Wrestling. If that made sense, like yeah, like cause well that's the most like available to Western audiences. Cause so yeah, Chris, New Japan World is kind of like a subscription service that anyone can pay for. So for £7 a month, you can literally like watch like all New Japan wrestling live and when it happens. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Dan, is there like a lawnmower or something happening your end?
Yeah, somebody's definitely using a strimmer.
Some guy's chasing me with a chainsaw.
Right. Once again, guys, we apologise for any audio right there. Jack, are you getting annoyed by the lawnmower? Thank you, Jack.
Okay, so
Yes, Chris, go on.
Oh man, I thought I heard him there for a second.
No, Jack is fine. There's been no chainsaw that's hurt Jack. Jack is okay.
I suppose my question, as someone who doesn't know that much about Japanese wrestling, is sort of what makes it distinctive, other than, you guys have said a lot of Japanese wrestlers clearly put in a lot of time and effort to, sort of rise to the top and try to make the matches as interesting as possible. But, are there certain, like, types of story arcs they're known for? Is storytelling maybe not even as much a part of it? I'm just really curious about that.
Can I take this one?
Go ahead, Dan.
Yes. Well, Japanese storytelling is mad. I'll be honest, it is completely insane. There was a pro wrestling company called Wing, which they had a female terrorist wrestler who wrestled their top babyface, the Great Muta, who's one of Japan's best ever wrestlers. He did the green mist on her, and she got pregnant. I mean,
what?
And then she gave birth to a 30-stone baby called Akibono, who then feuded with the Great Muta.
Jack.
Now, it's an acid dream, isn't it?
Jack, this is some great storytelling, isn't it? Say that again, Jack?
Sorry?
That sounds like the storyline to Brain Dead. Zombie
But
film.
that is literally... It was literally a film, and yes, I know what film you're referencing, but that was literally a Japanese story arc. And if you want to know what made that even more weird, they then brought a Portuguese wrestler in called Jason the Terrible, who was a Jason Voorhees ripper-off, who was going to kill the baby with a machete. So, yeah. That's
All right. I mean, that's definitely, like, they're not holding back.
No,
we can use
I mean, there was another occasion... There was another occasion with Wing where the general owner decided to take on and became infected by M. Bison from the Street Fighter series.
What?
And then started to dress like him and created his own stable of all wrestlers that were weird. Like, I think one was a giant octopus man and another one was a sex doll.
What the hell? So, I'm kind of a bit disturbed by that, but also DDT Wrestling, that's a promotion, Chris, that does intergender wrestling. So, for example, one of the more recent popular tag teams have been Japanese female wrestler Riho teaming up with one of the greatest wrestlers that's currently wrestling right now, Kenny Omega. And that's another thing about Japanese wrestling. If you're amazing in the ring, or if you're a gaijin, which is Japanese for foreigner, if you're a foreign wrestler coming into Japan and you're very good, they'll respect the living hell out of you. Like, I mean, Chris, do you remember a wrestler called Vader?
Yeah.
Yeah, Vader is so respected and absolutely loved in Japan. Like, I'd argue that Vader is more legendary in Japan than perhaps in America. I don't know if that's a fair assessment, Dan.
That is a fair assessment.
Oh, wow.
Vader
that's great to hear.
I mean, he once had a match with Stan Hansen where 5 minutes into the match, Stan Hansen accidentally thumbed him in the eye, and his eye came a third of the way out.
Oh.
And not only that, what makes that story even more incredible is Vader finished the match, which was a 25-minute match. He wrestled 20 minutes with his eye eventually coming 50% out of his head.
Wow. When was that? That must have been... Go on, Chris.
I want to see it, but I also don't want to see it. I need to look that up after this.
Yeah, Vader Stan Hansen.
Wow.
It's incredible.
He's like, wait a second, he just puts his eye in, doesn't he? And then just start punching him in the face again.
Yeah.
Wait. You know the story too, Jack. Wait, why am I not surprised you know the story?
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what the worrying thing is, Dre? I've shown you this.
Because there's so much stuff. But, yeah, the older stuff I know a few things of.
Oh, I get you. I get what you mean. Yeah. Sorry, Dan. You were saying?
I said the worrying thing is I've shown you this, Dre.
Oh, I think you did, but I think I was probably so disturbed I forgot. But then again, my memory is not the greatest anyway.
Did you ever see Piranha Death Match?
Which death match?
They had a Piranha Death Match where that was like...
Corona Death Match? What?
There was like a tag of piranhas in the middle of the ring and they're just like putting each other in.
See, this sounds like the wrestling I would have just loved when I was watching it as a teenager. This is something I'm going to have to dig into.
Yeah, just to clarify, this is not the wrestling that often happens these days?
Well, yeah.
I don't know. I've seen some weird Japanese shit recently. I saw a match where the ring was surrounded by crocodiles.
What? Wow, that sounds absolutely banana. Wow. Oh yeah, and here's another thing that's also that we forgot to mention. A lot of Japanese wrestlers, they get trained in dojos and the like from a very, very young age. I mean, like a lot of the wrestlers that you may see today that are from Japan, like Riho, for example, she's been training since the age of 8 or 7.
Oh, dang.
Like,
yeah, Yu's been training. There's a Japanese wrestler. She's up and coming. I don't know if you guys have heard of her, but she's going to be incredible. I've met her once. She has been wrestling since she was 3.
Wow.
And my God, is she good?
How old is she now?
Sorry?
Is
She's
she...
in her young 20s now,
Ah.
but she's one again. I had a conversation with. She wrestled somebody who she was meant to sort of learn from, and she made them look like a star because she was just so naturally good. Why you? Just keep the name in mind.
Absolutely.
Just to clarify, she didn't also grab your butt, did she?
No, she didn't.
Okay. Just want to make sure that your list of best wrestlers to watch out for isn't just the list of wrestlers who like you.
No, because if that was the case, then I would sit there and say all my friends were like the greatest wrestlers ever. Of course, the greatest wrestler of all time, everybody knows this, is Jackie Hyde.
Yeah. Do you agree, Jack?
No.
That guy knows how to put somebody over. And there goes a man on a motorbike.
Oh my God. Yo, just so you know, feel free, comment below. We love you, Dan. Just to ensure that Dan's safety is paramount, because it seems like Dan is going through Armageddon talking in this podcast. Wow. What other wrestling? So also one amazing thing about Japanese wrestling is that they are the kings of literally like keeping factions together and really making a faction matter.
Yeah.
Like this is going to be a slightly controversial statement, but arguably the best faction they have currently in New Japan, the Bullet Club. I think the Bullet Club overall is a bigger and better group of people than the NWO.
Than the what? The NWA?
Yeah, NWO.
Oh, yeah, the NWO was just about money making. It was just a load of money grabbers. But I would like to point out that perhaps Bullet Club wasn't the best team to sort of reference there, Dre, because they haven't got one Japanese member.
No, they do. They have Kenta.
Do they?
Yeah, Kenta's one of the leaders.
Has he been added?
Yeah, Kenta's in Bullet Club.
They've got what's his name? You're a hero. I'll be honest, personally, the best Japanese stable right now is Los Ingonobles de Japan.
Oh, yeah, because they've got all the gold at the moment, yeah.
That's, if you want to sum up Japanese wrestling right now, look up those guys' matches, because that's just brilliant.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, obviously, if we're talking about Japanese wrestling, we can't not mention Bullet Club. I mean, I think Bullet Club is really, I think it really helps. Bullet Club has really helped get New Japan on the map, and of course, like we open to like factions such as Suzuki Gun, how do I pronounce this? Iglagambles de Japan. Like, I probably butchered that, didn't
Los
I?
Ingonobles de Japan.
Yeah, that. Yeah.
Los Ingonobles de Japan. It's just fun to say.
Yeah. So Chris, in Japan, the big event, though, there's two usually locations that are the big events. So Kurikan Hall is usually a specific venue mainly for wrestling. That's usually for big events, and also the Tokyo Dome, that's reserved for Wrestle Kingdom, which is basically New Japan and Japan's version of WrestleMania. That happens early January, and that is big. We're talking big event. It got so big that this year it was a 2-day event, wasn't it, Dan?
Yeah, it was. I'll be honest, leading up into it, there's the Wrestle Kingdom tournament, and the Wrestle Kingdom tournament is just filled up and incredibly stocked. It's if you want good matches, go to that tournament every year, because they always put the best of the best.
And don't forget the G1 Classic as well.
Sorry?
The G1 Classic, that's also...
That's it.
Yeah, the G1. So basically, Chris, Japan also does this kind of like tournaments where it kind of like goes group tables and ranking kind of thing. So the G1 Climax is basically... so I think it's like 6 wrestlers or 10 wrestlers in each block or something like that. And the best person on each block face each other in the final, but it's a grueling 6 to 8 week tournament. And it's so incredible, like some of the great matches, and it's like so prestigious. It's arguably the best tournament in wrestling in general that's still been going out. I mean, The G1 Climax has been going on for 29 plus years, I believe.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely check it out. Definitely, I would definitely subscribe to New Japan Pro Wrestling. Like their online website for their streaming services. But also, if you have a little bit more money, Stardom also has the World of Stardom online, so you can watch that too.
Oh, brilliant.
Definitely, highly recommend. Yeah. So Jack, who is, in your opinion, your favorite Japanese wrestler?
I'll say Nakamura.
Yeah, Nakamura is good. Yeah, we forgot to even mention Nakamura. Like, it just shows you how WWE is just shitting on him. Because he's like completely like, it's almost like he's been an afterthought. Even though he won the Royal Rumble in 2018, he's still an amazing talent.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
I had two really quick questions,
Go
if
ahead.
you don't mind.
Go ahead.
So one, I imagine from what you said earlier about how young these wrestlers start training, that this is probably not the case in Japan. But obviously in America, wrestling is like very much a cult of personality. It's about, bigging up that crowd, entertaining the crowd, which is awesome. And I'm sure that's true of Japanese wrestling. But it seems like more and more, a lot of wrestlers are using their wrestling career as like a stepping stone to, a different sort of business, whether that's, Hollywood or, I don't know, like fitness or whatever it might be. It seems like they're sort of, tackling this not as their career, but almost as like, act one.
I would argue.
Does that happen in Japan?
That's usually, I think 99 times out of 100 more so in Japan than in Western countries. I feel that if you're a wrestler, that's your life basically. That's your career. I mean, you've got like wrestlers such as Minoru Suzuki, who's in his 50s, but he still wrestles so incredibly well.
Oh wow.
And like, yeah, that's another thing. Japanese wrestlers, they tend to like have a lot longer careers, I would say, than Western wrestlers, because they just take care of themselves a lot more,
Yeah. Is there less pressure to be like, Brock Lesnar big over there?
It's a different system. It's a different system there. Dan, would you like to elaborate?
There's less steroids there.
Okay.
Well, it is. It's more about the art in Japan. Wrestling in Japan is considered an art. In the United States, it's considered entertainment, sports entertainment.
Yeah. Specifically WWE, by the way, not necessarily other promotions.
No, but then AEW has a kind of a Japanese feel about it, which is kind of how they do business.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Jack, would you agree that Japanese wrestling, like Japanese wrestlers, they focus more on the art, whereas a percentage of, let's say, the biggest American company in wrestling, they just think of it as some sort of like more of a soap opera rather than wrestling?
Yeah. Like, what I fucking hate in wrestling now is I hate how everyone's kind of just... I know, like, you're supposed to be yourself and shit, but everyone's literally just, like, themselves in wrestling gear, what everyone else wearing shit. Like, I don't know, when you feel the Japan stuff, everyone's got their own character and their own thing. And it's all, like, got meaning to it. Whereas down here, it's like, you got, what's his fucking name? What's his name in AEW, the fun guy?
Hold on, Michael Nakazawa?
No, what's his name? Orange Cassidy.
Yeah.
Like, you got, like, things like that, like, I don't know, like, crowd like it and shit, but I don't understand it.
Oh, I get you.
He's a sloth.
Well, I mean, Dan is a massive fan of Orange Cassidy, so...
I find him funny, and he's not a bad wrestler when he gets going, but, yeah, it's meant to be he's a sloth.
Yeah. Well, I think, Chris, I'm going to send you a whole load of clips of what we're talking about, like, because we're only here via audio. But no, like, I mean, yeah, Jack does bring a good point that if we compare Japanese wrestling to more American wrestling, I would say that the characters in Japanese wrestling are far more defined, and
look at, compared to all the other women wrestlers in WE. Look at all like everything's all bright and colourful. Nothing else looks like that. Whereas everyone else kind of has all the other, like, not all the other women there, but the majority of them all like blonde hair and wear the same clothes and shit.
I get what you mean. Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, like you could tell, like all the Japanese wrestlers that wrestle in AEW and even in WWE or in the developmental, they all have their own kind of vibe. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas, yeah, WWE, if you're listening right now, yeah, can you stop doing the kind of stereotype gimmick where like, oh my God, Japanese wrestler that can speak English, don't pretend they don't speak English, make them act angry, yeah. Yeah,
Nakamura had the same thing, didn't he?
yeah, like what was it? I know speak English. Like what the hell is that? He can speak fine English. His English is alright.
We're
Like
speaking English as we say it.
exactly, right. And yeah, so yeah, WWE. So out of me and Jack, I'm the one that swears the least out of us two. But yeah, fuck you and your racism. So yeah, Chris, have you got another question?
Yeah, so the other question was around, and this might be boring to some, I just find it a little bit interesting, in terms of power dynamics. So, wrestling in America is big bucks, but I don't actually know how much the wrestlers make. I know it must be, enough to keep them in the game, but because, like I said, so many of the most popular wrestlers seem to leverage that popularity to try to, step into a different industry, a different career, it seems to me like it must not be long-term, viable for them. Whereas you're saying Japanese wrestlers tend to have much longer careers. Does sort of the pay reflect that? Is that why they're having those longer careers? Is because they get paid enough that it's a healthy living, or is it more, listen, this is all I've ever trained to be, what else could I possibly do?
Dan?
I'll be honest, I think it's the second one. I do know a bit of what like WWE wrestlers get paid, and they get paid a ridiculous amount of money that we wouldn't blink at. We would sit there and take it straight away. They do work an incredibly long schedule. With Japan, I think wrestling, as I said, was an art, and I think they love the art so much that they will always be associated with wrestling.
Okay.
But then, see, I can tell you things like one of the first ever Japanese wrestling stars was a guy called Antonio Inoki, who once got paid $1.5 million to fight a 6-round fight with Muhammad Ali in one of the first MMA fights, where he just laid on his back and kicked Muhammad Ali's legs every time Muhammad Ali come near him. Fights on YouTube, and he got paid like $1.5 million for it.
Wow.
And back in those days, that's probably like, if we quantify it now, that's probably like 10 million now.
Yeah. I mean, Ali didn't get anywhere near that sort of money, and Muhammad Ali is possibly one of the greatest athletes of all time, and like one of the massive names, but Inoki was such a big name in it that he commanded such a high price to do it.
Absolutely, and Inoki is like literally one of the godfathers, or if not the godfather of Japanese wrestling.
Yeah, him and Giant Baba, and they're like on the Mount Rushmore of
Did you see
Japanese wrestling.
the shout that guy?
Yeah.
Bernard.
What, with the yellow trousers?
Yeah, Bernard. Giant Bernard. Or whatever, the Great Bernard or something, his name.
Explain that.
Yeah,
Yes.
Sorry, explain it.
Yeah.
Basically, Bernard refused to sell any of Inoki's offense, so Inoki went and decided, right, well, I'm going to take this into my own hands, and just started slapping him in the face. And he ended up slapping him sort of so much that it made the other guy look silly.
He's literally like laying on the floor like all bleeding, just stomping on his head.
And he's sitting there going, please stop, and the referee had to stop the match. But yeah, the guy just refused to sell any of Inoki's offense and made Inoki look piss poor. So Inoki was like, right, well, if you're not going to sell my offense, I'm going to kick the crap out of you for real.
Yeah.
Wow, man.
Yeah, that's some deep stuff. But I'll tell you this, that's kind of more like very, very, very rare of that happening. Like for the most part, Japanese wrestlers are perhaps the most professional group or collective of wrestlers around. Like, yeah, for sure. I'll tell you this also, Japanese wrestling is also popular for breaking the scale, per se. So a few years ago, there was a match between, many matches, but the first match between Kazuchika Okada, who was then the IWGP Heavyweight Champion in New Japan, so that's the top belt in New Japan, and he faced Kenny Omega, and that became 6-star match, and everyone blew their mind. Like, so Dave Meltzer, who is one of the biggest wrestling article writers, like a very big prominent member of the wrestling media, Dave Meltzer, who has reviewed like hundreds of thousands of matches. That's the first ever match he broke the scale of 5-star scale. He made it 6 stars out of 5.
Nice.
Like, yeah, did Dan and Jack, did you watch that match?
I've seen it. It's an amazing match. It's incredible.
Jack? Okay, thank you. I asked you, sorry. I asked you, Jack, if you watched the first Okada Omega match in New Japan.
Oh, yeah.
Did you like it?
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't give it also.
You wouldn't give it 6 stars out of 5, yeah?
Nah. I don't think like anything. I don't think like a match or anything.
Yeah, so tell
us. I don't know. I think rating some 5 stars has got to be like the fucking elite of the elite, and like nothing bad's got to happen, nothing like everything's got to be dun 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 like perfect. Whereas I don't know. I don't think it's possible to really have a perfect match.
That's a very interesting perspective, actually. Like, that's a very interesting perspective because obviously none of us are wrestlers except you, so that's a very, very intriguing perspective there, actually. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'll tell you what. So, all right, Chris. So all right for you. Ask each of us one question, and then we'll just wrap it up, man.
Sounds good. All right. So, Dan, what is your favorite, like, ridiculous theme match that Japanese wrestling offers? Because, like, you have cage matches and stuff like that in America. Is there anything uniquely Japanese that is along those lines that you just think, that's brilliant?
I'll give you 2 examples. One that I think was just incredible, and one that I thought was so stupid that it was just just amazing. The stupid one is there was once a match which is, I think, on record as being the longest wrestling match of all time, which lasted a total of 49 hours.
Wow.
Which is it's just 2 guys in this ring, and they lock up, they go to the outside, they stay locked up, and then they were walking around the streets just in a lockup. And then they went into a river and they lost sight, and then 48 hours later, the next event, they came back into the ring, still in the lockup. And it's so funny and so incredible. The other thing that they do, which I think is brilliant, is I referenced this earlier, and I might get some heat for the fact that I'm referencing this because I think it's just incredibly funny and incredibly weird. Is that they had a Japanese sex doll called Yoshihiko, which you can Google. It's so funny, but it actually held belts in Japan, and it was a huge draw. And there was a load of people dressed in like black shadow gear behind it who was moving it and making it look like it was actually wrestling. Kota Ibushi once, this was the bit I was getting to, like the incredible bit. Kota Ibushi, who we haven't mentioned in this, but he's an incredible wrestler. He once put on what was called a 4-star match by Dave Meltzer with Yoshihiko, which is a sex doll. He literally put on a 4-star match by himself.
Wow.
That's how talented Japanese wrestling is.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And I remember Dan showing me this damn footage as well. I'm like, what the hell am I watching?
It's incredible to see him and Yoshihiko, a sex doll, in a fight. I mean, at one point he hits a Canadian destroyer on him, and it's just incredible.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, Jack.
To dress up as a sex doll.
Sorry?
Why didn't they just get a wrestler to dress up as a sex doll?
No, he wasn't dressed up. It was one.
He's asking why not. He's asking why.
I don't know. I don't book this.
All right, Chris, your question to Jack.
Jack, so as the resident wrestler of the group, what would you say is like the most legendary or impressive like finishing move to come out of Japanese wrestling?
Oh, I'd probably say the one everyone do now is Rainmaker, isn't it?
Yes.
Won't
Yeah,
do that.
that Rainmaker is a big ass, like literally like when he does that lariat like clothesline Rainmaker, it just looks as if it's like he's gonna knock someone's head off. Yeah.
Mm.
And
Or
when
if you go to sleep.
oh yeah. Oh, that too. The original Go to Sleep.
Shit, yeah, the Kenner one was sick.
Mm. Oh yeah, when the one went like at the landing of it. So Chris, to give you imagination, you know what the F5 looks like from Brock Lesnar.
Yeah.
So it's the starting position similar, like the same, but instead of like doing a spin, you just basically like kind of like drop him on your knee, and then
Okay.
like from the standing position, and then a good sell. I would say, I don't know if Jack agrees, is when you literally like the opponent just buckles up on the knees and literally looks as if they look dead.
Mm.
Just eat it in your face.
Absolutely. And also, oh, and that one thing I forgot to mention, Jack and Dan and Chris, is that the Japanese commentators or even the English commentary team for New Japan, whenever the Rainmaker have, they're like, Rainmaker! Oh, Rainmaker! Like, they go ape shit. Like, they're really selling it as the greatest thing since sliced bread.
We got through this whole thing without one shot of racism.
Look,
Now
right.
we're gonna have to refilm.
Just to clarify, guys, it's chill. Like, you know, it's okay. Any offense, we apologize, even though Dan is slightly joking. But yes, much love to you guys.
Okay, actually, that tees things up nicely. One more.
You mean DrayZera? Who's Zuma?
Oh, sorry, DrayZera.
Go on.
Do you have like a favorite Japanese commentator? Because I know obviously in American wrestling everyone's loyal to sort of different folks. Is there anyone in particular you gravitate towards?
Well, I mean, I think one insightful commentator and somebody who is quite inspiration, and someone who's only just recently retired from wrestling but does commentary for New Japan, Jushin Thunder Liger. I like his insightfulness. Whenever I got subtitles from his Japanese speaking, cause obviously I don't know how to speak Japanese, so you know, like yeah, Jushin Thunder Liger. He's another wrestler where Dan would agree he's a timeless wrestler. Yeah, absolutely incredible wrestler. An amazing commentator. Yeah, so Dan, do you have any quick final words to say?
I've actually enjoyed this podcast a lot more than I thought I would. I'll be honest, I felt a bit out of my depth, but it's all come flooding back.
Oh, it's all good. Like that's why we brought you in. Not only because you're an encyclopedia of knowledge, but you're just great to chat to, Dan. For 27 long years, hell yeah.
Thanks.
No worries, buddy. Jack, do you have any final words?
I've only known Dre 3 years.
DrayZera's been around for 4 years. Anyway, Jack.
I only met him 3 years ago.
Oh, controversy.
He was
Jack.
harassing a man in the woods.
Oh my days! Like, all right. Just to clarify, that was for a spoken word video. So let's just get this into context here. Anyway, right. Jack. Any final words for you?
No.
Jack has not enjoyed this podcast.
Right, guys. Just to let you know, Jackie Hyde's socials are. What are your socials, Jack?
Jackie Hyde on Facebook.
And at the moment, your Instagram is still banned, right?
Yeah.
Because of the fact, if you don't know, Chris, Jackie Hyde's mask designs are apparently too violent for Instagram.
Oh
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you know we're doing a GoFundMe, we're doing a change.org, we're talking to the government right now to get himself reinstated. All right, we're joking, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna Illuminati.
Yeah.
All right, and Chris, tell us your social links for all the world to know.
Yeah, so you can find me at chriscamble.com. That has the links to all my social accounts. But the one that I'm most active on is Instagram, and so it's just Chris Campbell. It's spelled like the soup, except there's no P in it.
I hope there's no P in the soup.
Well, no, there's P in the soup. There's no P in my name.
Well,
Are you telling me there's P in the soup?
Well, there's a P in the way the soup is spelled.
Oh.
Okay, so my last name is entirely a fiction invented by my now dead father, because for a brief period in time, for like 3 or 4 years, in America, Campbell Soup changed the spelling of their name from having a P in it to not having a P in it. I don't know why. Must have been a marketing move. Anyway, during that period, apparently my dad looked at a can of Campbell's Soup and went, Campbell? Okay, yeah. I'm going to do an alias with the last name of Campbell. And then, when I was born, because he was a wanted criminal at the time, and he had to give his name, he was like, oh yes, Campbell. So I am literally like the first person born in this world with the last name Campbell, from my family at least. But it was spelled wrong, and so my entire life, everyone's like, oh, Campbell. And I'm like, no, there's no P in it.
And that has been very, very insightful indeed. So yeah, all of the social media links that we've just mentioned will all be down below. Dan, you have no social media links, do you? You're all chill with that?
No, I have absolutely no. But I do sort of reminisce with Chris's story there, because I took on my father's name, obviously, as well, and he was a hideous man. And for a brief while, until I had it changed by default, I was, of course, as you know, Dre, Goat Fucker Pettit. But named after my father. Oh, Dad, if you're up there.
Oh my God!
Well, he ain't going to be up there, is he? He's going to be down.
Yo. Like, the last 20 minutes of this podcast has been a madness, I have to say. Alright, guys, this has been the DrayZera Uncensored podcast with yours truly, Jackie Hyde, Dan Pettit, and the guest extraordinaire Chris Campbell with no P. It has been heavily clarified. So yes, feel free to check out the socials. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe to DrayZera Uncensored. And if you enjoyed it, just comment below and tell us how you feel. So this has been DrayZera, and everyone, thank you and bye bye. We shall zero later. All right. Thank you.